All right, guys, let's talk about the literary analysis paragraph assignment. Mostly what we want to do here is talk about thesis statements, and then we'll get into a little bit of what we'll be adding to and the type of, process of finding evidence and making a rough draft. So I'm going to go ahead and open this slide presentation. Which will take forever, apparently. Totally fine. All right. So once you have this open, we're going to look at this for a minute, and then we're going to go to the green writing thesis statement slide presentation. So first, I want you to think back to an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which was the Ambrose Bierce story that we read last week. If you haven't done that assignment, you need to go finish that assignment before you can do this. So once you've finished the story, what I want you to think about is an aspect of the story. For example, any plot devices, character choices, the way the setting is used, the way the narrator is used, use of flashback, particularly the way that the internal thoughts of the character is presented, the protagonist, and any theme that might be present that you notice. And what one of those things kind of sticks in your mind about that story when you think about the story. And take a few minutes to jot down some ideas to basically explain to me what it is about the story that kind of sticks in your mind and why you think that's the thing that has stuck in your mind. What is it about that that makes it really grab you as a reader? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, or you can pause this video and take a few minutes to jot that down. It can be a bulleted list, it can be a paragraph, whatever helps you to write it. It should not just be a list of words, because that's not going to help you when it comes to writing the paragraph. So take a couple minutes and do that, and then unpause the video, and we'll move on. All right, so you should have your brainstorm ready now. So on our next slide, when we start to think about a thesis statement, what we want to do is consider what you wrote. Just let it sit in your mind for a minute and think about where you could go with the paragraph, what it is that you want to argue about it. So now let's talk about thesis statements. So we'll go over here, we'll open up our writing a thesis statement presentation. I know this is a little more step by step than you probably were thinking, probably more than I was thinking. All right, so when we talk about writing a thesis statement is very important. In fact, you can't write an essay without one, because the thesis statement is the thing that you are arguing to me in your paragraph or essay. It's your opinion about the subject of the essay, and it answers a topic question, one that either you created or one that is created from the prompt, because all writing prompts are really just questions, and we're going to look at that a little bit as we go. So a thesis statement should never contain the following: in my opinion, I think, I believe, any of these kinds of this is what I think statements. But as you're writing a rough draft, it may help you to use these kinds of phrases to make sure that you are, in fact, including an opinion in your thesis statement. The easy mistake to make is to write a thesis statement that doesn't actually have an opinion in it. It's just a restatement of the prompt, just a declarative sentence. So it may help you to use those phrases to make sure that you have an opinion, and then you can just eliminate those when you go to write your final draft. All right, so a thesis statement, you need to have a subject. Sometimes you'll see that referred to as the abstract portion of the writing prompt. The concrete element, whatever literary device you're going to use to support your claim, and your claim. An effective thesis statement makes a claim about what you believe to be true about the subject. Because it is an opinion, you need to offer evidence to support it and explain why your opinion is valid. If you don't have good, strong evidence to support your opinion and show that it's valid, your reader doesn't have any reason to take you seriously, because then it's just what you think and there's no support for it. We need support there. So the thesis statement lets the reader know from the very beginning what you, the writer, intend to prove. So let's talk about good and bad thesis statements. A good thesis statement is short and simple. It should be no longer than one sentence, regardless of the essay length. Okay, so don't think, can I break this up into several sentences? You don't want to do that. Even if you're writing like a 40-page graduate level research essay, your thesis statement is still just one sentence. It should just be, it's just the kernel. It's the too long didn't read part. Okay. So we have a good example. Success is the result of doing right things consistently. All right, so my subject is success, and my opinion is it results from doing the right things consistently. Here's a bad example. Yes, this is one sentence, but as you'll notice, it's really wordy. There's no reason for all of these words. It's definitely using words to make you think the writer is like super smart and educated when they're really just using a thesaurus. In a world full of success gurus and books about success, it becomes ever so more important to delineate the one trait that ultimately determines success: doing the right things consistently. Like half of those words aren't even necessary. So you don't want to do that. It's too much and it's going to turn your reader off. A good thesis statement is limited to one main idea. The key to successful dieting is focusing on a specific goal. So our subject here is successful dieting, and our opinion is that the key is focusing on a specific goal. In our bad example, we have that same sentence, but then they've added running a business and coaching a football team, which is too much stuff. Nobody wants to read about all those things. They're here to find out what the key to successful dieting is. It doesn't matter what running a business and coaching a football team do. It doesn't have anything to do with your real subject. A good thesis statement is a declarative sentence with no qualifiers. Remember, you're the expert. You are answering your reader's question, okay? You're not giving them mights or maybes here. So here we have a good example. LeBron James's ability to score, pass, and rebound make him the league's most valuable player. So, here we have our subject is LeBron's ability to score, pass, and rebound, and your opinion is those things make him the league's most valuable player. Our first bad example is just a question. They've just turned the prompt into a question. There's no statement here. There's no opinion here. You don't want to do that. No questions for thesis statements. And then our second bad example here is it just might make him the league's most valuable player. Again, you are the expert. You are giving us the answer. You are arguing a specific thing, not a might or a maybe. So make sure you eliminate those. And again, if it helps you to throw those in there at first, that's okay. Nobody's going to police the rough drafts of your thesis statement. But when you get ready to write your final statement, you've got to pull those things out. Write several different thesis statements. I'm not going to read through all of this. Write your statement from more than one point of view if you need to, depending on what the topic is. Since we're doing a literary analysis, that's not really necessary. But do write several drafts if you need to. And pick the one that you think sounds the best. That's okay. We'll get to the evaluating part of this later. If you want to read through these, you can. But we're going to skip ahead here too. Oh, and let me just show you here. This kind of reiterates what I was talking about. We have some formulas. Feel free to use a formula. It's okay to use a formula for your thesis statement right now. In the text, "An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge" by Ambrose Pierce, the author shows theme, whatever you think his theme is, through character development and use of flashback. Okay, feel free to do that. Nobody's going to censure you at this point for using a formula to write your thesis statement. All right, so here we have an example prompt practice. I'm going to walk through this so that you can see how we take a prompt and turn it into some questions and then use a thesis statement to answer it. So here's a sample prompt. Read the passage carefully. In a well-written essay, explain how the author uses imagery, figurative language, and detail to characterize Scrooge. Okay, so we have several things here. We have a concrete, which is imagery, figurative language, and detail. We are going to explain how the author uses those things to, and here's our abstract, characterize Scrooge. So what kind of character is Scrooge? That's a question we need to answer. That's where your claim is going to come in. What kind of person is he? What literary elements reveal that? And in the prompt has basically told us imagery, figurative language, and detail. And you don't have to use all three of those. You can just use imagery and detail. So what we need to do is we take these 3 questions and we turn them into a thesis statement. So here's a thesis statement that is typical of many beginning writers, as you can see from the heading. It has several good elements, but it's missing something really important. In A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, the author uses many different types of figurative language to characterize Scrooge. Okay, so we have the abstract element characterizing Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. Those parts are there. We have the figurative, what literary elements reveal that characterization? Well, they're going to use figurative language. I would suggest maybe not saying uses many different types of figurative language. You might want to pick a few things, like maybe uses a lot of symbolism or allusion or, metaphor. Say several different types of figurative language, or uses figurative language and then get into it in the essay. But what you'll notice is missing here, we haven't answered the question, what is the writer's claim? There is no claim here. There's no opinion. We just know that the author uses different types of figurative language to characterize Scrooge. But what is Scrooge's character? That's what's missing here. So that's why it's important to consider, are we answering all the questions? So here's a better thesis statement that answers those questions. In A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, the protagonist Scrooge is portrayed as the archetypal, greedy, cold-hearted character through Dickens' use of figurative language such as similes and metaphors. All right, so what is our subject? Again, still we have the characterization of Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. In A Christmas Carol, the protagonist Scrooge is portrayed. What literary elements reveal that characterization? We have use of figurative language such as similes and metaphors. And our third question, what is the writer's claim about Scrooge's character? The writer answers the abstract part of the prompt by stating that Scrooge is greedy and cold-hearted. So now we know this writer is going to prove to us that Dickens uses similes and metaphors to portray Scrooge as greedy and cold-hearted. Okay, that is a really strong thesis statement. So let's go back here to where we were. So now we're going to start writing a thesis statement. Given the information we just covered, look back at your brainstorm. Use what you wrote to complete one of these writing prompt questions. So I've given you 4 writing prompts, and you can choose the one that best fits what you wrote about. Describe how Bierce uses some type of story element or figurative language to convey the theme of, what do you think a theme is in the story? Bierce thematically conveys his views of what? War, death, life, any of these things by using element and element. Describe how Bierce uses element and element to create, what tone, what feeling for the readers or that kind of thing. Describe how Bierce uses element and element to foreshadow the end. Now, if you look at the About the Writer in the Springboard, it will tell you some things about why Bierce wrote what he wrote and what he'd like to write about that can help you get a handle on the theme of the story. If you want to write about the theme, or you want to write about how he uses foreshadowing to give characterization, that kind of thing. So then use what we discussed in those writing the thesis statement slide to create questions that your thesis statement should answer. So you want to turn this prompt, one of these prompts, like this one here, into those questions. What is the subject? What literary elements are you going to use? What is your claim? Okay, so in this case, Bierce uses, this is going to be your literary elements to convey the theme of, this is going to be your subject. So then you're going to need to tell me the claim. Now, use what we discussed to create the questions your thesis statement should answer. You should have a question about the abstract, what is the subject? A question about the concrete, what literary elements or plot devices, writing devices did Bierce use in the story? And a question about the claim. What is your opinion that you're going to argue? Finally, create a thesis statement to answer these questions. Look back through all the good examples of thesis statements to get ideas. Use the prompt as your building block, but make sure you do not merely restate. Again, if you need to put "in my opinion" in your rough draft thesis statement to make sure you have an opinion, feel free. We'll just write it out when we get to the final draft, okay? Now, I think the assignment that's under this day has the spot where you can go ahead and put your thesis statement in here. But you will want to submit your thesis statement in the assessment before the due date. Don't stress about it. As long as you have a subject, what literary elements are you going to use as your support, and an opinion, we're going to work with that. Okay, this is not a final grade on this thesis statement. What I want you to do is just give it your best shot. See what you can do. Once you're ready, once you have your thesis, you're going to want to return to the story and put some evidence in here that supports your thesis. Add the most compelling evidence to the outlines numbered lines. Remember that you don't need to use complete sentences, but quoted text should be kept intact. Feel free to copy and paste. Just put the paragraph number so you know where you got it from. You should have 3 or 4 items of support. You don't have to have 4. Don't feel the need to find a 4th. If you find 3 things that are really strong, that'll be fine. But it's better to have 3 things that are really strong than have like some random 4th thing because you felt like you needed 4. You don't need 4. 3 will be fine. But if you find a 4th thing that you really want to use, feel free to put it in there. Once you're finished with that, here's where we're going to put the evidence together. Now, this is super rough. I'm not going to grade this. We're just going to look at it. This is just for you to practice. So what you should do is copy the thesis statement, put it in here. Then you're going to grab a piece of support, put it under the thesis statement. Then explain how that support proves your claim in your thesis statement. Do the same thing with support number 2 and the same thing with support number 3. If you have a support number 4, that as well. Finalize with a wrap-up sentence. Now, don't worry. Your wrap-up sentence can be terrible. We're not really even worried about wrap-up sentences yet. You just want to have one there so that you remember that it goes there. If you need more space, make sure to continue on another slide. So, when we get back to school, we'll work on this some more. The only thing that you should be working on, because this was due at the end of the week, so I am going to kind of keep my eye on it, don't put it off, is the thesis statement, is the thing I'm mostly worried about. The rough draft and everything else can wait until we've talked about it a little bit more, and we might even have a little time in class to work on it. But I can't promise what day that will be, so do be aware. If you have any questions, feel free to message me.